Welcome to the Bulwark podcast. It's Friday. We got to Friday, and I was looking forward to chatting with Tim Miller and having a relatively cheery close to the week, or at least, not if not cheery, at least relatively cheery. And talk about talk about your video about Joe Biden's big brass clankers. That kind of thing. And we talk about Nicki Minaj and the swollen ball, all of that stuff. But so before I go to bed last night, get the headline. Here's the Washington Post headline. GOP Representative Gonzalez, this is Anthony Gonzalez, who voted to impeach Trump, announces he won't seek re-election, citing toxic dynamics inside our own party. And so Tim has a piece up on the Bulwark this morning, which sort of captures the mood. Dark omen in Representative Anthony Gonzalez's retirement. So, by the way, first of all, happy Friday, Tim.
Happy Friday. We can still do some double entendres and do some bollocks, but yeah, it's
The word,
that
the
that
word,
one slapped me across the face last night.
yeah, we will be able to work the word nards into our conversation today.
Great.
But let's talk about this, because this is one of the, was it I forget what, 11 Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump after the insurrection. And Gonzalez from Ohio, was really one of the ones that I had kind of circled as probably, relatively good position, because I mean, he's kind of an ideal candidate in that district. He's a former, well-known athlete, and he pulled the plug. And the way he did it, I think, and you point out that it's a deeply ominous sign for our politics. So Tim, since you wrote the piece, tell me about it.
Yeah, look, I think it was 10 Republicans, by the way, just as
Oh,
a
10, yeah,
early
yeah,
morning fact check. But
yeah.
look,
Inflated.
Gonzalez, I think, was not unlike Cheney and Kinzinger, God bless them, who kind of have gone, guns blazing all the way in on taking out the MAGAs, and are basically honorary Bulwark members now at this point. Gonzalez was a little bit of a different animal. I mean, he was in his second term, had come in during the Trump era, had been, you wouldn't call him a Trumper, but had done what all the National Review types tell you want from a Republican in the Trump era. He voted for him on the policy, and anytime a reporter called to ask him about any crazy thing Trump said, he was washing his hair. He's bald, but he still was washing his hair at that moment and couldn't quite get around to it, and so he there was no reason for the base of voters before the insurrection to think that he might be a primary threat, or that he was a big rhino cuck like Kinzinger. He was a conservative, and not only that, he was a local football star. He played for Ohio State, got drafted by the Indianapolis Colts. And so he had this story. Unfortunately, he had an injury that derailed his career. He goes to get an MBA from Stanford. I mean, if you wanted to just paint a picture of a Republican in the MAGA era that you could stomach, it would be the kind of both sides could stomach. It would be Gonzalez. So then all the post election stuff happens, and they're recruiting him to vote to overturn the election, like or to sign these letters like Dan Crenshaw did to overturn Pennsylvania's election votes. And he's like, no, this is crazy. I'm not going along with this. He votes for the impeachment, and now he was going to run a primary against this guy Max Miller, who I swear to God, I mean, this person is like out of a one of those 80s teen movies. And he's
Yeah.
like out of Revenge of the Nerds or something, or maybe in 90s teen movies, if the Sarah Michelle Gellar Cool Intentions was a man. I mean, he's like a trust fund baby rich kid who's done nothing in his life except vote for Donald Trump. He allegedly assaulted his girlfriend in the White House when he was working for Trump. His girlfriend at the time was Stephanie Grisham, the press
Hmm.
secretary, who never answered any questions from the press. According to Politico, has a long rap sheet. Has no policy critique of Gonzalez. Has no football career. Didn't go to Stanford. I mean, this guy has nothing
You
going
describe him
for
as
him.
an avatar of deplorable Trumpism, which is
Yes,
I think is a
exactly.
good turn of phrase.
Yeah, he's
That
like
that
Biff
Yeah, it's
from
like
Back to
Biff.
the Future.
No, see, this is what
He's
I
got
was actually
nothing.
thinking of. I was actually thinking about how many Biffs are in this administration.
Yeah.
It's like you come up with the cartoonish version of the worst asshole, stuck-up bully in high school, and you get Max Miller. and
Yeah,
a lot of other folks that hang around the Trump world.
that's
But
exactly
Max
right.
Miller, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so Gonzalez now walks away from a primary against Biff because the election was solely going to be a referendum on, are you willing to go along with Donald Trump up to and including when he overthrows our democracy? That's it. There's no policy critique difference. There's nothing else. It was a referendum on up or down. Do the voters of Ohio, do the Republican voters in Ohio want our democracy to be overthrown in favor of a Trumpian dictatorship? And Max Miller was like, hell yeah, bruh. And Gonzalez was like, this seems a little far. And Gonzalez didn't even make it to the starting gate of this race, right? And so I just think that is, as we said in the headline, a dark omen for the party. It's what we all knew. I mean, it's a validation of what you and I and others the Bulwark have been saying. But I just I think that it's been ridiculous for a while, but the posture among elected Republicans and among many in the conservative media class of just, well, we can just kind of wait and let this blow. Once again, that is just made to revealed to be as ridiculous as it obviously is on its face. Like there is no waiting around. The party is a Trump cult, and pretending that it's anything other than that it's not, is going to lead us down a path to potentially having another Trump cult presidency.
Well, we of course don't want to name any names of this class of professional ostriches who spent the half decade wishing Trump away and downplaying the danger. We wouldn't want to name any names like Ross Douthat in New York Times. But I mean, this is
Rich.
again. I mean, as if we needed another reality check. Okay, so let's talk about his decision not to run because,
Yep.
as you point out, he's a 36-year-old congressman. He should be at the start of his career. He should be one of the rising stars, and now well, he's done, at least in this chapter. So he tells the New York Times that he could have survived his primary. He thinks he could have beaten Max Miller, but he realized as the year went on that he didn't want to come back to a Trumpy caucus. He didn't, he figured I could win, but do I really want to be with these guys? He said, you can fight your butt off and win this thing, but are you really going to be happy? And the answer is probably not. So part of it is like, I could win, but what's the point having to sit and, watch Kevin McCarthy with it. So
Yeah, I mean, he's a professional competitor. He was an athlete and then decided to go to Stanford and then decided to run for Congress. So I think that a competitor is never going to say, "Yeah, I was going to lose anyway." He was going to lose. I just, if he was going to win, or if he felt confident he was going to win, I sort of find it hard to believe that spin from him. The other thing that he said to the New York Times was that this wasn't about safety with his family. It was more about wanting to spend time with his family, not wanting to spend
yeah,
time with these MAGA jabronis in Congress. And maybe that's true. I'm sure that was part of it. But he also volunteers twice to the New York Times that it was a big impetus for this was when he landed at the airport with his family recently, and they had to be escorted by security because of threats against him by MAGA crazies and the calls that they were receiving at the house. It's another 80s and 90s movies tropes about how like people are going to be coming to the house. They're having horror movie calls at home. And I think you have, I don't know if it's this Monday or next or coming up, you have Jeff Duncan, the Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, on.
yes, right.
And I was talking with him a couple weeks ago, and he said this, he had come to the same realization. He was looking out the window of his office, and they had all this security. This was before this was during the Georgia runoff when him and Raffensperger and others were saying that the election was on the up and up, and Trump was saying it was fraudulent, and they had like military guards outside his office, and he was like, I had this realization that these people are protecting me from my people, from Republicans. This isn't it's not like there's a foreign terror threat or something else that's happening out there. It's Republicans I need to be protected from, and that is the same with Gonzalez. I think that regardless of what was the final straw that broke the camel's back, the fact that a 36-year-old who should have been a rising star in any other world, there's an open Senate seat that he could have been running for in Ohio. The governorship is going to open up. So somebody that should have been a rising star in the party is now cast out because at some level they are afraid that Republican primary voters might hurt their family. And if this isn't just, banging the pots and pans wake up call for everyone to the right of us, from the National Review to the Dispatch to any of these other Examiner guys, who want to think that something's happening that isn't in this party. I don't know what Anthony Gonzalez, what could be more of a warning sign about how out of step that ostrich Republican class is with the actual Republicans, and Anthony Gonzalez resigning because he's worried his kids are going to be hurt by a MAGA person. And even if they aren't hurt, he doesn't want to have to continue going on pretending to be part of a Donald Trump cult when he comes to Washington.
So what do
That
we
is
yeah,
alarming.
so what do we think about this? I mean, I think that Anthony Gonzalez, and I tweeted this out last night, he was a patriot, and I was referring to his courageous vote to impeach the president. But how do we feel about these guys walking away, walking off the field? I mean, look,
Yeah.
I mean, we're all human beings. They, in part, these violent, credible threats they've received for not going along with the Trump coup attempt. But at some point, don't we want to root for people? No, stand and fight. Have the courage of your convictions, because if you guys leave, if the Jeff Duncans leave, if the Anthony Gonzalez's leave, if the best and the brightest, the people who are willing to do the right thing, if they're retiring, doesn't that just leave the party solely in the hands of the worst of the worst?
Yeah. I
So do we want
really
them to stay,
understand.
or do we what? I mean, how do we?
Yeah. I
I'm
understood
conflicted.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was basically, stay and fight, don't walk off the field, was basically my view
Hmm.
in 2018, right? I was really upset at Flake, for example. Like, I thought that it was a worthwhile
Jeff
fight.
Flake, senator from
Yeah,
Arizona.
yeah,
Yeah.
from Arizona, when he went the Gonzalez route, and and retired rather than run in Arizona. I thought that it was important to have someone in the Senate, in addition to Romney, like Flake, and that he could have maybe won in Arizona. It had a McCain kind of streak and of Republicans there still at the time. I just In 2021, I don't. I don't know what we're asking, why we're asking him to do a suicide mission in a party that attempted to overthrow the government, and then has gone on 9 months later, to act like no big whoop, like we're just going to continue going on as business as usual. I don't think that asking him to continue to be a part of that party, um, is a worthwhile ask. I don't think that's serving anything. Here's what I do think,
Huh.
though, what I worry about on the Gonzalez's of the world. He says in that Times article, well, I just Donald Trump can't be president again, and in retirement, I'm going to dedicate myself to fighting that. And I'm like, I just hope that you understand what that means, right? That what's stopping him, what's stopping him means, and maybe it means that there is a challenge from inside the party, from someone that many of us and our listeners won't like to stomach because they have a MAGA background, but they'll be more better than Trump, and it requires an actual campaign to defeat Trump from someone that had been a MAGA ally in a primary. Maybe Gonzalez can be part of that. I'm open to that being a useful use of his time. But if it isn't that, it's really aligning with the Democrats to stop these guys. It's aligning with Tim
Maybe.
Ryan in the Ohio Senate race. It's aligning with whoever runs in 2024. And so if you're just going to say, I'm going to step on the field, I want to stop them, but all stopping him means is, going on Chris Cuomo's show every once in a while and criticizing him. Like, that's just not. But
Writing
still
writing
saying you're a
writing in
Republican.
Edmund Burke, writing in,
Yeah, writing in Edmund
yeah,
Burke, like,
so
that's not it. And so I guess I want to let's see what he does over the next year and a half. But I don't know that we should be, hoping that people, stay in. If you can't stay in the Congress and say what is true, you know what I mean, Charlie. It could be one thing if he was running for
right,
reelection and was able to say Trump tried to steal the election. I'm still a
right.
conservative and I'm running on this. But if you have to run on the, well, the insurrection was bad, but he still had some great, if you got to do that, then you're not doing it. You're not doing anything of value anyway. Actually, you're hurting the cause of making people aware of what the state of play is.
No, I am sympathetic. I mean, I want these guys to be the champions for sanity, but I also understand that you spend a year and a half, campaigning, raising money, doing all of this stuff, blood, sweat, and tears, and what do you win at the end? Anthony Gonzalez, you win. You've won the chance to spend the next 2 years surrounded by assholes, and who will despise you and will make you do all kinds of terrible things. Okay, speaking of sedition. And speaking of the insurrection, actually, when I was putting together my newsletter for this morning, I thought I was going to be leading with this before the Gonzalez story. And I understand that there will be some of our friends who think, "Oh, come on, you and Tim need to move on from Donald Trump. You guys are obsessed. You know, anti-Trump is just as bad as pro-Trump, right? Um,
Oh
but
god.
so we have a probably a relatively small group of deplorable MAGAs types who are coming to DC on Saturday to have their pro January 6th riot demonstration. I get the sense that's kind of fizzling out. But here's the extraordinary thing, and let's just take a deep breath to acknowledge that this happened. This is significant. It is not normal. The former president of the United States, the de facto leader of the Republican Party, the overwhelming favorite to be the Republican Party nominee in 2024, issued a statement yesterday expressing explicit solidarity with the rioters who were arrested in the January 6th attack. Okay. Now, again, there's so many elements there. So we're not just talking about the peaceful protesters. He is expressing solidarity. This is the most extreme possible position he could have. The people who have been arrested, many of whom some of whom assaulted police officers, who committed acts of vandalism, who tried to overturn the election, who may have wanted to hang Mike Pence. And this is what he wrote. This I will read the whole statement. It's not that long. Our hearts and minds are with the people being persecuted so unfairly relating to the January 6th protest concerning the rigged presidential election. In addition to everything else, it has proven conclusively that we are a two-tiered system of justice. In the end, however, all caps now, justice will prevail, exclamation point, end quote. So he is all in the revisionist history, embracing January 6th, the man who the man who incited that insurrection is now praising the insurrection and promising solidarity with the people who participated in that insurrection. I think, by the way, there's no doubt that if he becomes president again, he will pardon all of them. So, again, could we just sort of notice that we talked about the sedition caucus a lot? But
Yeah.
Donald Trump is the seditionist in chief, and there should be no ambiguity about that whatsoever. And nobody in the Republican Party, with the exception of, say, Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, want to push back and say, hey, listen, this guy is the seditionist in chief. This is not normal politics.
Yeah, nobody says anything, Charlie, and it's
Yeah.
like, and by the way, it was worse than that. The people that know better, the Ben Sasses of the world,
Yeah.
frankly, the Mitch McConnells know better. He might have other things you don't like about Mitch McConnell, but he knows that what Donald Trump did that day is wrong. They've convinced themselves that saying nothing about this is actually the right thing to do and the right and moral thing to do. And that it's like you said at the beginning of this, it's those of us that are obsessed with him that want to bring this up. And the right thing to do is that hope is to just hope it just goes away. Like hope is not a strategy. And this guy has a stranglehold over the party right now. Every open primary, people walking off the field because they're afraid, as like Anthony Gonzalez, and 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 all of these guys in Washington are doing the same thing they did in 2015 and 16, hoping that he'd just go away and lose. But now, knowing that he actually would try to overthrow the government, they're still repeating the same failed strategy. So, yeah, look, I think that his comments on those the January 6th, being pro the January 6th rioters. I mean, again, we had to listen to all of these false equivalencies about the Antifa riots,
Mhm.
which there was no pro Antifa riot happening in the Bulwark. But we had to suffer through all these false equivalencies about, well, you're getting all upset about January 6th, but where were you about Kenosha? Well, for starters, we talked about Kenosha, but number two,
I'm writing a
nobody in
piece about Kenosha, by the way. So
yeah, there you go. Nobody in Kenosha was wearing Joe Biden's brass Clankers shirts, right? Like nobody was waving any Biden flags. Nobody, Joe Biden wasn't putting out any press releases talking about the heroes that were breaking into these buildings, and if you want to go back to even a more dramatic example, there were certainly no Democrats who were, talking about the persecuted terrorists, that were, radical Islamic terrorists during the various attacks during the 2000s, right? This is Donald Trump siding with with rioters and with domestic terrorists, and you have to be just explicit about what it is.
Yeah, and there's nothing unsubtle about it. And every Republican in the country should be asked, okay, do you agree with this? Do you support this? What is your position? Does this change your position, relative to your support for Donald Trump? Hey, Tim, I want to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about Joe Biden's big brass clankers. I want to talk about the California election. I want to talk about Nicki Minaj. And I want to play for you some audios about essentially what we've been talking about. Anthony Gonzalez is out. Liz Cheney has a target on her back, but the Paul Gosars of the world, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, the Lauren Boeberts, they are members in good standing of the Republican Party, which is awfully revealing. So let's talk about that on the other side. Thanks for listening to today's Bulwark podcast, and a special thank you to all of the Bulwark Plus members. We launched Bulwark Plus a year ago, and I don't think we really had any idea back then how fast it would grow, or the kind of challenges we'd all be facing in the post Trump era. If you've been listening to us or reading our newsletters, the in depth pieces on our homepage, you know that we are committed to telling you what we think in a thoughtful, non tribal way. But we're also not going to pretend these are normal times, and we're not afraid to try to make a difference here at the Bulwark. And we intend to keep fighting because the challenges to democracy are more urgent than ever. None of this would be possible without your support, and we're very grateful. If you haven't signed up yet for Bulwark Plus, please consider becoming part of the Bulwark community. And if you already have, thanks. We think you're in great company. Okay, we're back with Tim Miller. Hey, can I play some audios for you?
What I'm so
Just
excited.
going to
Couldn't want anything more.
palate cleanser. Palate cleanser. Okay. So here's since now we're discussing vaccine mandates and whether or not, for example, you should be required to show the proof of vaccination to get on an airplane. Some airlines are moving in that direction. So here's one constitutional law expert discussing this.
We should be encouraging them to reject this. This is a medical apartheid, plain and simple. There's over 100 million Americans who are not vaccinated. I think it's even more than that. And if they want to start shutting down air travel for these people to get around the country, I think that's actually a constitutional violation because you actually have a constitutionally protected right
Article
to
50.
free, unrestricted travel within the United States of America.
Anyway,
and I genuinely believe that what's going on right now is that all that's going to happen if United Airlines and American Airlines and Delta even, if they decide to start requiring vaccine mandates, let me tell you, I'm very confident there will be another air carrier that will come to the field and patriots like myself and you will give them all of our business.
Yeah, Air MAGA. So I'm sorry to have to break it to you, Tim, but that was a sitting member of the United States Congress,
So, can you
Madison
believe Anthony
Cawthorn.
Gonzalez doesn't want to hang out with that guy?
See, this is the thing. Okay, so Anthony Gonzalez is thinking I could work and I work, and what do? I have to go back into the caucus and I have to sit with complete deplorable morons like Madison Cawthorn. So, okay, you and I are not constitutional, we're not constitutional lawyers, but I'm pretty confident in saying that there is not a constitutional right to freely fly on an airline in any way we want, right?
I had my pocket constitution for a little while back in my Republican days, Charlie.
Yeah.
I'd carry that around. I'd thumb through it from time to time. I don't remember Madison, sort of waxing on about the Delta Airlines amendment.
Get it,
The
Delta.
the right for a sick person spreading a deadly disease to fly on a private airline. I don't think that's quite right.
Yeah, no flying on Delta, but we're going to fly on the what? Delta variant airline. Madison Cawthorn and all of the patriots are going to go on MAGA Air, COVID Air, where you can do anything. You can lick faces. You could. I'm sorry. I'm restraining myself talking about the COVID karma. I'm sorry. More people who had actively said that there's nothing there. We should oppose the mask mandates. Getting sick, including crazy Laura Loomer. But
Can I
okay,
just rant
so
about one thing on
sure,
COVID
please,
karma before we get to the other clip?
I need to
Because
rant.
I just we've been sort of alluding to Nicki Minaj's friend's cousin's balls, and I'm sure people are a little bored of hearing about the bollocks around that. But
And it's flat tire.
Yeah, his flat tire.
Okay.
And look, I love, "Say So" by Doja Cat featuring Nicki Minaj, and, "WAMP" is pretty good for me,
Ugh,
but
okay.
she seems like a talented artist, but, like,
Horrible person.
a horrible person. I'm so sick of the victim culture around this. We talked about this a little night,
Yeah.
but I feel like it has to be brought up because I think that it's sort of like people are now getting a little bit scared to speak out against the unvaccinated in their personal lives because this like narrative is taking hold where it's like you're talking down to them or you're making fun of them. And Nicki Minaj is like, "Oh, Joy Reid's making fun of me," and it's the same thing that Tucker's saying on Fox, and it's the same thing that VD Jance is saying in his tweets, and that all these, Glenn Greenwald even says it. Across the board, you see this like, oh, these elites, these snobs on the coast are making fun of people, these poor victims who are unvaccinated, and it's just like, I'm so sick of this. I'm so sick of this shit, and you see these stories, and this is why you cannot be you know, I understand that you don't wanna, like, dunk on the Harmon Kane Award winners and the people with karma, but it's like, there are real victims who are so associated with those deaths, right? Like,
Yeah.
the young children whose parents died because they were snowed by whatever was on their Facebook feed, and friends and family of people who are listening to Nicki Minaj's nonsense, who are gonna lose a friend or family member or have lost a friend or family member because they're worried that their balls are going to be engorged or a microchip's going to be in their head. It's like those are the victims in this situation, right? Like
Yeah.
as much as you can feel bad for the dead, like the family, the children, the friends, like there are a lot of people out there who have suffered real world harm. There's a great Time magazine article by this guy Ross Dellinger, who's a beat writer for
Mhm.
LSU, who's a great writer. His aunt, who was like his best friend, growing up, and sort of the one aunt that he had a really close relationship with. He wrote beautifully about this. She just got swept up in the misinformation, wouldn't get vaccinated. She's dead now. I mean, those are the people who are around those folks are victims, and it just makes me so mad to have to like watch on Twitter and on cable like the victimization culture around people who are just being irresponsible assholes. You're not a
Yeah,
victim, you're an
well,
asshole.
I'm not buying I'm also not buying into the sort of the we need to, appease the reckless and the imbecilic. I mean,
Right.
why should we be concerned? Okay, you are spreading misinformation that might kill people. We need to be respectful of you. We certainly can't mock you. Fuck you, seriously. I mean, it it was and it was an interesting moment when you had Dinesh D'Souza who was tweeting about Nicki Minaj and Tucker Carlson, and it just did strike me as this, trifecta of imbecility and recklessness and cynicism and opportunism because by the way, that Dinesh is vaccinated. You know that Tucker Carlson is vaccinated. You know that Nicki Minaj eventually will get vaccinated. And yet, what about all the people who were influenced by them, whose confidence might have been undermined? I just this whole notion that somehow we should not call them out because what they're just fucking snowflakes.
Right. And by the way, Nikki is being stupid and being used by these people. And like she should be called out for that. Like you did and the fact that she's going on with this and retweeting Tucker and going on with Dinesh, these are the same fucking assholes that were doing the racist race baiting attacks on last summer on WAP and how like this isn't even music. I mean, you can just picture in your head what Dinesh D'Souza said about that, about how she's degrading our culture and this isn't even music, and if it was, I wish for the yearn for the old days of Frank Sinatra. That guy never talked about sex in an inappropriate way, and it's just like and she's being used by these people who want
Well,
cover.
that's the cynicism.
Yeah.
You have an ignorant time wasting celebrity. I mean, I thought it was pretty hilarious that that in Trinidad and Tobago they actually had to waste time tracking this down to find out. By the way, the term flat tire is I took this from a guy from on Trinidad television who's ripping her and he was saying, why is Nicki Minaj talking about her cousin's friend's flat tire, referring to his, shall we say, his lack of ability to perform, which I thought was an interesting use of the English language, which I'm always interested in.
That's good.
You
Yeah,
know,
I focused my not my party this week on the
it's great.
plums double entendres, and I had a little fun with it. And in retro, I've gotten madder, and this is what I'm like kind of venting my anger at Nicki Minaj right now because I went for more of a sort of jovial mocking tone in the on the Snapchat show, but over the last 2 days, my anger and my blood pressure has built, so I needed to
Well,
balance
no,
that out with some shouting.
I'm with you on that. Okay, so let's get to that question. I have the audio that I'm gonna hold it off for just a second because I want to stick to this. So Joe Biden gives the speech where he announces that he's pushing for more of these sort of quasi mandates. I think it's important to mention that when we talk about the companies with more than 100 employees, it's not really a requirement to be vaccinated. It's a requirement of vaccination or testing. In any case, we know that certain people thought, well, you're just changing the subject. This is a distraction. I mean, 1,900 Americans dying, and you're changing the subject from what we want to talk about. In any case, your sense, this is a risky move.
Yeah.
The polls would suggest that he's got most Americans behind him. The California results would back that up, but California is not America. I'm sorry to break that to you. So give me your sense, Tim, on the politics of this. There is a risk of a backlash. How do you think it plays out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the politics is good right now. I think that in the short term, you look and you see Glenn Youngkin in Virginia coming out against the mandate, for example. I'd rather be Terry McAuliffe than Glenn Youngkin on this one. I think it obviously is going to be different state to state, but the same kind of college educated voter who put Biden over the top in the first place. Your college educated swing voter. Some of them are never Trumpers, some of them are independents. Your security moms, your traditional swing voter. Um, that crowd is going to be mostly for the vaccine mandate, and so I think in a lot of ways that helps solidify, really the Biden's base. That said, over the long term, I don't know. It can kind of add up the sense of like discomfort about the, sort of give the Fox News crowd another talking point, in order to stir up rage about the fact that this is a dictatorial presidency or all that. As stupid as that is, coming off
They
what just happened
didn't.
with
They
Trump.
didn't. They don't need another talking point. It's
Yeah,
going
that's
to be their
true. That's
talking point,
that's
whatever.
true. That's true. But and then I think if it doesn't work, you have risk,
Well,
right? Like if this still sticks
that's
around, it's like, well, he did this mandate, he put this mandate in place, and it was, and here we are, in wave 5. I think that's a little bit of a risk. So I don't. I think anytime you take you make a move that is this, outside of what people are used to. I think that there is a bias among humans towards status quo bias. We say that we want things, and just look at like the Obamacare charts, for example. It was like it was popular, 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 and then it actually happened, and changes happened, and it became unpopular, 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 and then people got used to it, and then it became popular, popular, popular again, right? like
Right.
like there's like a little bit of that like status quo bias among humans. So I think it's good short term politics, risky medium term politics.
So we had an exchange on the Bulwark Thursday night live stream last night. It's an interesting exchange. We talked about this question, and what I said last night was, and Jonathan last kind of disagreed, it's a very interesting discussion. My initial take last night was on the question of the political risk and whether there's a downside to it. Is I don't care. I don't care because this is the right thing to do. And at some point, I wanted to just step back from the horse race political punditry and the poll driven policy and say, look, if this will cause millions of people to be vaccinated and save millions of lives, it is the right thing to do. And looking back on it, even if it costs people elections, it is the right thing to do. Now, Jonathan then quickly pointed back and said, well, okay, so should we really care about these people that much? I don't want to put words in his mouth, correct me. But also, is it really worth watching Republicans take back power, watching Donald Trump return? Ugh, this is why it's difficult. The other, I guess, my other take on all of this is the biggest threat to Joe Biden is not the blowback to this mandate; it's the blowback to failure. That the worst case scenario is, as you point out, the next Delta wave, the Lambda wave, whatever, whether or not fifth or sixth, hundreds of thousands of more Americans dying. That's real failure because that will ripple through the schools, it will ripple through the economy. There's no way that that is not an existential threat to the Biden administration. So
Yeah,
take
and
the
I just want to
political
add
hit,
one
yeah,
other.
but take the hit on this one because the hit of failure is there's no coming back from that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm for if that wasn't
Yeah,
clear, totally for this
yeah,
this mandate. I think the other, just adding one other layer as you look at kind of lambda or whatever next potential variant is, the boosters, right?
okay.
Again, you could see fatigue happening with this, frustration. People are like, I did it before, now I got to get this booster, right?
I want the booster.
I think, yeah, TBD on whether, if how this mandate intersects with a booster. I think that could also potentially, that's just kind of a known unknown about whether there's another, that also could impact backlash, et cetera.
No, that's true. Okay, so I want to get to California in a moment because you did
Yeah.
call that one. And I want to get your take on this, but I did have another soundbite. Just gives you a sense of the environment on the right at the moment. Now, this is just put it in con. This is Newsmax, and a veteran named Joe Sabo, who is the founder of Team America. Is that right? Yeah, Team America? This is one of the groups that's been trying to rescue people of our Afghan allies, and he's a veteran, and he's been doing some pretty remarkable work, and for some reason decided to go on Newsmax. In any case, he's on, and they're talking about you know what has happened, and this veteran ventures a very relatively mild comment that the Trump administration maybe was not as great about this, referencing the fact that during the Stephen Miller era they were shutting the door to all sorts of refugees. Listen to this, because this really gives you a flavor of what the MAGA media looks like and sounds like, because and just spoiler alert, the host shuts off, Joe Sabo shuts off this veteran in rather flamboyant way. Let's play it.
We followed this closely for multiple administrations, and we know the Trump's administration's efforts here were fairly weak. That they were trying to limit the number of people that would get out, and so there was coordination problems.
Joe, I'm gonna cut you. I'm already weak. I'm already low on time, Joe. Joe, cut him off, please. Cut him off now. Cut him off now.
We're doing it live.
You're not going to blame this on President Trump on my show. That's not happening. Now, I appreciate the work that you're doing. God bless you for being a veteran. God bless you for trying to get Americans out. But don't come on this program and take the talking points of the left and blame President Trump. That's not helping anybody. The Biden administration screwed this up from the very start. You know it. I know it. The country knows it. And to call them not hostages, I don't know how you don't call them hostages. They're stuck in Afghanistan with a country overrun with terrorists that are willing to kill them all. I'm mad about that, man. I really am.
Yeah, man. Yeah, God bless you for all you're doing, but shut the fuck up if you're going to criticize the Orange God King, right? Because I'm not listening to that. You can't come on my show and criticize them. We're not allowing that. There's no play. Wow. No points for subtlety.
No, yeah, I thought they were going to commercial break there. He had a lot to say. It seems like, the whole the Afghanistan thing is a nice microcosm of just how nihilistic all this is. Like, had Trump pulled out of Afghanistan like he promised to do his entire 4 years, and then that he'd planned to, all the way up till 5 days before he left the office on January 15th, Newsmax would have been wall to wall. Thank God that Donald Trump, is the one to end the blobs, 20-year war of the neocons and George Bush. I mean, there's been less than zero consistency across MAGA on this topic, and obviously that's why you can't engage with a veteran who actually agrees with you on the merits of the withdrawal in a good faith discussion about like how we got to this problem, because there's no consistency. It's just anything that's good for Trump is good, anything that's bad for Trump is bad. It doesn't matter if there's a line between A and B.
I also wonder, just on a professional level, don't the anchors have a way of like ending an interview without yelling, "Cut him off! Cut him off! God damn it!"
I don't think on Newsmax. I have to tell you, I did a Newsmax interview back in my glory days as a Republican operative, and their headquarters is in like Palm Beach, Florida, up past Fort Lauderdale, and it was like a ghost town in there. I mean, it was a very creepy vibe. Like you could tell they bought this fancy studio space, but like then they didn't have the money to fund the people to staff it, so it's like creepily quiet in there. So I don't I don't know that they do have the technology to cut someone off besides screaming.
Okay, let's talk about California.
Yeah.
For much of the year, as you wrote about, the pundits were wringing their hands like, "Boy, this is close. This is really tough. Republicans could win this thing." And then in the end, not only did Republicans fall flat on their face, but it was a blowout by any measure. Now, okay, it's California. A lot more Democrats than Republicans. So on one level, it doesn't change anything. On the other hand, I don't know that people saw that kind of a shellacking coming. It was so big that the Larry Elder, Donald Trump types didn't even bother to go through the motions of saying that it was stolen. I suppose that's the best news, right? The
Yeah.
whole Stop the Steal 2.0 completely imploded on itself because they got blown out by nearly 30 points.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. The latest, 77% in. They're down by looks like 2.7 million raw votes
Yeah.
and 27%. So yeah, it's kind of hard to claim 2.7 million stolen votes. Though they've claimed crazier things. So why not? I didn't think it was going to be that big. I mean, I thought maybe 15 to 20, and it could get down closer to 20 if the late votes are more of the election day votes, and those tend to be more Republican, lately, because obviously Republicans don't trust the mail. Never know what's happening in the mail. There could be George Soros, could be your mailman, and throwing away your ballot. But I think that what we saw was a repeat of what we've seen in a lot of politics lately, where one side is buying their own BS and thinking that they can win a state just by juicing up the turnout of their base, and that's what Larry Elder tried to do. And like that just isn't gonna fly in California. Like the fact that Gavin Newsom went to one stupid dinner that he shouldn't have been to at the French Laundry, like, is not enough for people of the state that is overwhelmingly Democratic to say, okay, well, we're going to go with a climate denying, anti immigrant, pro reparations for slave owners talk radio host instead, because we were annoyed at the hypocrisy of Gavin's dinner. Like, that was a position of like three rich dudes on Twitter who don't like the tax rates here, and like they're all going to move to Miami or Austin anyway. Like, is not a broad based opinion here. Gavin had which I wrote about a month out, had a 60% approval rating among all voters. And he's about 63% in the recall right now. So, it was right on line, basically with what you'd expect. So I think the only things to learn from this is that if you want to actually win in a state that's not if you're a Democrat and you want to win in a red state, or a Republican in a blue state, you can't do it just through base turnout anymore. That just does not work in our
Yeah, no kidding.
politics. I think you saw the continued move of college educated voters, suburban voters. Orange County, traditional Republican strongholds, did not support the recall. That's good news for suburban Democrats in the midterms about being able to hold their spot. One warning sign is the one demo that tracked away from Gavin from 2018 was, again, Hispanics. I think working class Hispanics. So I think that's maybe one little red flag for the Democrats.
Well, yeah, there are a couple of red flags, including the fact that you can still get blown out in a state like California, but in the closer congressional districts, there still might be enough momentum for
Yeah.
Kevin McCarthy to get out. Okay, so a couple of things that really struck me was, number one, this seemed like the triumph once again of the entertainment wing of the Republican Party. That
Mhm.
rather than going with somebody substantive who could have actually talked about real issues, and there were candidates that could have possibly done that, Republicans have become addicted to going with the talk show host types. I say that as a former talk show host, no disrespect, but it is the entertainment wing, and it shows how dominant they are, and whether or not the Republican Party can break free of that impulse to go with the most flamboyant, loudest primary candidate, even if they stand no chance of winning a general election.
Yeah, there's no market for a reasonable, so it's a line to this Anthony Gonzalez thing. The mayor of San Diego, Kevin Faulconer, was a classic Tim Miller Republican. He like believes climate change is real. I'm not a Republican anymore, but when I was, he believes
Yeah.
climate change is real. He supports immigration reform. He doesn't do racist dog whistling nonsense.
No chance.
He's
No,
your he's
guy's got no shot.
yeah, exactly. No, and he had finished up with 9%. There was nothing. There's no appetite for this, and so you see this on Twitter. Like smart people, Politico reporter asked this, and Chuck Todd I think knew the answer, but asked me. I went on his podcast and he asked me about this, and it's like, yeah, I mean, it's like they're like hypothetically, if the Republicans had gotten behind Faulkner, would it have gone better? And I was like, I mean, hypothetically, had LeBron James decided he would be a Republican, would it have gone better? I mean, it just there's no. Uh, LeBron James isn't a Republican. Kevin Faulkner is not what Republican voters want, right? Like, so it's a nonsense hypothetical. Like Republican voters right now, it is a party of Larry Elder and Donald Trump and Biff Max Miller. Like that's what Republican voters want. And so like, that's not going to fly in a place like
Oh,
California.
okay, so here's a hypothetical though,
Yeah, sure.
that if the election had been an up or down vote on the governor, on Gavin Newsom, on his record, which was problematic, wouldn't it have been closer than what it turned out to be? Because what happened was it turned out to be, at least it looks like, a referendum on the abyss on Trumpism. So
Yeah.
effectively, what happened was that Donald Trump got on the ballot, and that was enough to motivate Democrats. People were really concerned the Democrats would sit this out. There was a lot of apathy. I read like a dozen stories about Democrats just not caring or being down on Newsom.
Oof.
Newsom caught a break, right? Because he really wasn't, it wasn't about him. It became about Trumpism. So, I mean, there's another
So
dynamic,
I
right?
have two thoughts to that.
Okay.
Just first, really quick, those apathy articles, all those people
Yeah.
were just kind of wish casting. It
Mm.
just didn't have to be true, and that's a if the Latinos and some of the stuff you mentioned is a red flag for Democrats, a green flag for Democrats is it actually does work in a non-Trump election. To the negative partisanship play does work if you have a boogeyman, and that's a warning sign for Republicans in a Herschel Walker type race in Georgia, et cetera. That the Democrats did turn out for that reason. As far as up or down on Newsom, he wouldn't have lost. I mean, he has 63, right? I don't like. Would he have gone down to 49? I don't think so. I think that there's some Democrats who are upset with him, over housing. Some Democrats are upset with him over, other, kind of, you have your limousine liberal Democrats who are mad about the fact that there are homeless people in their neighborhoods, and then you have, more progressive Democrats who are mad that there's not more low income housing being built for the homeless, and that the Democrats are adhering too much to what the limousine liberals want. So there's this intra Democratic fight around that, and I think that somebody like Gavin in a one party state is vulnerable to either a populist left challenge within the Democratic Party or a center left challenge within the Democratic Party. If someone was able to kind of unite voters of color with more moderate voters in an Eric Adams style, I think he'd be vulnerable to either of those two challenges. But that's all within the Democratic tent. And like that's the thing, just really quick, going back to Faulkner and
Yeah.
and not to beat a dead horse on my Red Dogs article, but like Faulkner is a Democrat. Like if
Mm.
for all practical purposes, somebody that is believes climate change is real and wants to welcome immigrants into the country and doesn't want to overthrow the democracy, like you're not a Republican. Maybe you're an independent, maybe you're a Democrat, but it's a complete misread of the electorate for these people to continue thinking that there's like a path through the Republican, through Republican voters. And so like I think a better hypothetical to could had Republicans been smarter is if someone like Kevin Faulconer, you know, did what voters are already doing and abandoned the party and ran as a Democrat and didn't vote for Donald fucking Trump last time and instead voted for Joe Biden, could that have, could that rejigger things in politics here? That probably, by the way, that probably wouldn't work either, but you'd at least have a chance. There are at least some voters there that would listen to you, here, and that's just not happening in
Yeah.
within the Republican construct in California.
And California is of course a different world than
Sure.
much of the rest of the country, which I think we need to kind of remind ourselves of this. So, anything else we should be thinking about going into the weekend? Because I wanted to end on a cheerier note for the whole Gonzalez sedition thing. I'm guessing that that the rally on Saturday is probably not going to be a big deal. No, but
I'm with
but
you
you
on
know what?
that.
It does strike me though that Trump has this way of having it both ways. So he talks to the retrominient hacks over at the Federalist and says, "Yeah, I think this rally it's not my thing. It's designed to make me look bad." And he's kind of pushing, distancing himself. But then he issues that statement where he seems to endorse everything they are for. So he kind of wants it both ways, right? He kind of wants to gin it up at the same time that he wants to say, "Hey, don't tie me to that. I don't want to have anything to do with that." So he's kind of doing the two-step, isn't he?
Yeah, so our uplifting topic at the end is that
Yeah,
the
well,
is that the sedition rally isn't going to be
yeah,
quite as
yeah.
seditionist as we worried it was going to be. Yeah, I think that's right, and I think that they're trying to have both ways, and I don't. I mean, look, what happened on January 6th was was the catching lightning in a bottle, and you had that Georgia election the night before. You had Trump, still in the thick of it, pushing it. You had an actual day, a meeting time. You had this phony Mike Pence signing thing. You had, Trump in the White House, and I think we're going to learn this hopefully from the commission, discouraging, having more security out there because he didn't want him to rough up his people, right? All of people caught off guard, not really realizing just how radicalized the base was been because they were outside of the crazy Newsmax bubble. Um, like that's not where we are now, and so I think just for a lot of like kind of practical reasons, the result is going to be different, and that like and the threats are different, than having an exact repeat of 1/6. But I mean, yeah, I look, I think everyone who's trying to fit the Trump wing is doing the two. They realize that there's this kind of hot coal going all the way, going full, what they, surging the Capitol was good, right? So you got to get like all the way right up to that, to touching that hot coal.
Okay, so I do want to finish on an upbeat note.
Okay, great.
So, listeners of the podcast will know that one of the shows that I've recommended to our listeners is this British police show called Line of Duty, which you need to watch, Tom, Tim,
I've not Tom. Whoa.
Tom. Where did that
Tom
come? I'm
Nichols.
actually
Tom Nichols.
no,
I'm
no.
quite a bit younger and handsomer than Tom Nichols. Thank you very much.
Well, you're
I've not
halfway
watched this.
there.
I've not watched this police
Okay.
procedural.
Oh, okay. That's what it's called. And I mentioned
White
before
Lotus is my
the Queen.
favorite show lately,
The,
and that
the,
also had an engorged balls,
oh,
engorged balls
really? Oh,
plotline. So
okay, so you
very
recommend White Lotus.
I enjoyed that.
So New York Times had a piece just the other day about all of this. Obviously, crime shows have been very, very popular, but this Line of Duty, was not only watched by the Queen of England, who spends time watching this and talking about it with other, folks at Buckingham Palace. New York Times reports that earlier this year, 15 million viewers watched the series finale of Line of Duty, a police procedural that killed off a central character early in its first season and then another in the first episode of
Don't
the
spoil
second.
it.
This made it the most watched episode of British television drama of the 21st century so far, based on ratings for the first 7 days of a show's availability. So it was the most watched show ever, at least this century. And there's a new one out, which I have not seen, but I've read a lot about it. I'm very anxious to see it. BBC has a new series out called Vigil. It's a drama investigating a mysterious death on a nuclear submarine. And apparently, it is also red hot. It attracted double-digit millions of viewers to its first episode on the BBC, just in Britain now. But it is coming here. It's going to be on Peacock later this year. And so that's something to keep an eye out for. If you haven't seen Line of Duty, you need to see Line of Duty. Also, same producers made a series back in 2018 called Bodyguard, which is also a political thriller. And 14 million people watched the finale of that show, which was one of the biggest shows ever in Britain. So, Line of Duty,
All right, Charlie.
Bodyguard. Look around for Vigil.
You're all in on this. I'm not really a police procedural man, but I'll give Line of Duty a shot. And if we're gonna just end on a happy note, my pop culture happy note is: do you remember the that corny song that was everywhere 2 summers ago, "Old Town Road"? It's like the
Yeah,
country
right.
rap song. Okay, so that little corny skinny guy, Little Nas X,
Yeah.
has in the preceding 2 years come out of the closet. He's openly gay now, and he put out this rap record, Montero, that's out today, that is so good and so raw, and he's like a grown up now, and they are bops. He has shed all of the corny, country, cowboy hat, square dancing nonsense, and the new record is so good, and it was so risky for him to just kind of own his sexuality as a black gay man, and so I'm so happy for him, and I'm just going to be rocking Montero all weekend. So that's
Okay,
my
so
pop culture. You got your British police procedural. I've got my gay hip hop. That's what we're giving people.
And this is how we're sending people into the weekend. Hey, Tim, thanks for joining me.
Yeah.
And thank you all for listening to today's Bulwark podcast. We will be back on Monday, and we'll do this all over again.